12 drivers for each ear with 8 switches. Well, I think this is the most ambitious IM for 2023, and it's from KZ. So hello and welcome to Aftersound Review, and this is my review for KZ AS24 Switch Edition. So yeah, this IM is using 12 driver for each housing, and they have 8 switches that makes it possible for maybe around 64 sound combination, which is crazy, and all of that only costs around $100. Okay, but as you know that driver counts doesn't exactly means that this IM is simply the best over the others. There are a lot of factors around that, so just like usual, I will break down this review from the build, fit, frequency response, sound, and comparison. For the build quality, I would say that it's just like another KZ. I mean, it's all mostly made of plastic. Even though it's big, it's definitely big IM, but it's very lightweight. And yeah, you could see the drivers inside here. There's tons of drivers and tubings here, and you do get 8 switches like I said here, 4 here, and the other 4 is around this area. And you do get the usual KZ QDC type C pins, dual pins here. The cable itself is no different from other KZ, at least the newer batches of KZ. It's just the same. If you have bought the PR2 or the ZVX or the D-Fi, it's exactly the same. Well, ergonomics wise, I would say that this is the biggest KZ that I have ever tried, and that does affect the ergonomics for me, at least, because of simply I have small ears and this IM is quite big. Also, this IM is using all non-vented drivers, so when I'm using them for maybe around 2 hours, I would say that there's a pressure built up, and also because of the size of it, it just feels kind of pushed around my ears a little bit more than the usual. I don't really feel that I'm using them comfortably for around 2 hours. I need to rest my ears here. But I do feel that this IM is kind of lightweight, and also it doesn't have any sharp edges against my ear. Just simply because I have small ears and that pressure built up, making this IM is a little bit uncomfortable for a long period of listening. I'd like to give a little bit of complaint because of the switches here. Well, I have shown you that the switches is really small, but let me show you this compared to the KZ D-Fi with switches here. The switch on the KZ D-Fi, it's more deeper, and it's also simply bigger compared to this KZ AS24 you could see here. So when I'm changing the switch, at least in the KZ D-Fi, I could tell that I have changed this the switch, turn it on or off. But on the KZ AS24, since it's much more smaller and also much more shallow, it's like I'm only scratching the surface rather than changing the switch. And also the placement of the switch, it's also inverted, just like the KZ D-Fi here. So when I'm changing the switch on one side, I need to turn them up. On the other side, I need to turn them down. So it's adding more to the confusion. And also trying them one by one, it's also a bit confusing, since there's no manual what change when I'm changing each of the switches. But let me show you here in my measurement. So each of the switches does work. It doesn't, none of them are gimmicks or change nothing. They do work, but sometimes the switch is only changing maybe around 1 or 2 decibels, so it's a minor change, but yeah, it does change. Well, if you ask me personally, well, you can see it's around my measurement here. You can browse it yourself and you could tell what switches does what. But let me tell you that it doesn't change drastically. It just overall, it still has this kind of neutral-ish with a little bit of bass boost tonality, but it changed a few here decibel and a few here decibel. But for my own preference, I like to switch the main switch number 4. I like to turn them up to get more bass. This is the bassiest switch for the bass area. You need to turn the switch number 4 up, and also the switch here, I need to turn them up to give a little bit of airiness and also treble presence. So yeah, for mains main switch number 4 up, also auxiliary switch number 4 up. That's my own preference. Now, talking about the low frequency of this IM, well, you could definitely choose how much bass you want. But the thing here, that even though it has bass boost on the switches side, but none of them could give you this kind of bass head sensation. It just gives you that bass punch, but it's very BA-ish. If you are familiar with BA bass and also dynamic bass, dynamic driver bass, the BA bass tends to have a quicker response and quicker transients, but it doesn't have the same weight or bounciness or decay as the dynamic driver, making it for me more artificial. It doesn't sound as natural as the dynamic driver, even though it sounds quicker. So it does happen with this KZ AS24. Even though you turn the switch number 4 up on the main switch that give this IM the bass boost, but it doesn't make this IM a bass head IM. It's overall still a kind of neutral-ish kind of bass because it's quick, it's fast, it doesn't goes well with EDM music, but the bass is definitely there. And it definitely can go deep. It simply doesn't have the same volume, no, I mean the same texture and bounciness like you have in the dynamic driver bass. This is definitely not for bass lover. But it's there, it's quick, it can go deep. Now, the mid-range of this IM is actually really well tuned. I would say that it's, no matter what kind of switch that you use, it's still gonna be a neutral-ish warm kind of mid-range. That goes well with a lot of music for female or male vocal. It does give you really well balanced for the upper human voices or lower human voices. But another weakness that I found here is just same like its bass. It doesn't comes off as really natural. I do feel there's kind of BA-ish timbre going on here that makes vocal like Josh Groban or Kayla Settle or maybe Adele sounds, even though it's, I'm not saying it sounds thinner, but it's kind of lighter in texture. It's not as full as I would like when I'm hearing to their voice. But talking about the balancing itself for the female and male vocal, is actually done really well, really good. And here it's also clear and avoid of any sibilance. But it does have this kind of forwardness to it for some people because of the bass. It's not really, you know, it's not really powerful. The bass is not really powerful, and the mid-range is kind of neutral-ish here. Some people would maybe perceive this mid-range to be forward, and if you are really sensitive to that, maybe you can perceive this as a little bit of shouty. But at least for my preference, it's just well balanced, but not really natural. Now, regarding the treble, if I don't turn switch number 4 up in the auxiliary here, I would say that this is IM has a warm-ish treble, so it's not really sparkly, it's not really airy or extended or anything like that, but it's just well separated. But if I turn them up, the auxiliary switch number 4 up, it does have a really good and nice, I would say that's almost a linear kind of treble response, making any kind of music sounds proper here. The sparkliness, the brightness of the treble is just proper here and nicely tuned. But again, I can't help but feel there's a BA-ishness timbre here. But I'm just really nitpicking here. The problem is I'm a really dynamic driver lover. So when I'm hearing this, I cannot help but feel that the treble feels kind of plasticky. It's not really shining, and it's not really natural when I feel there's a cymbal crash. Hi-hats feel kind of soft, it's kind of light. There's exactly what happens with all of the frequency around this IM. It feels very BA-ish no matter what kind of music I tried. Now, for the overall tonality of this IM, I would say that it simply could be categorized as neutral with a little bit of bass boost, and it's really well balanced overall. But the thing that bugs me, that does bother me because I'm sensitive to the driver timbre, this IM have a really thick BA-ish timbre. So if you're really not into that, I would say that this will definitely not for you. But if you're okay with this BA-ish timbre and you're maybe not really sensitive to that, I would say this is one of the best choice that like around this price point because it has a really incredible technical taste that I would talk after this. Special thing is about multi-driver is the sensation of the layers, of the separation. So for example, when you're hearing really complex music like Wagaki Band, Sanbon Sakura, that's one of the songs that I feel needs to have a really good separation for IAMs. When I'm hearing that, because there's a lot of instruments going on at the same time when I'm hearing that music through a multi-driver that has really a lot of drivers, it feels like each of the instruments have their own speakers, have their own mics and speakers. So when they play together at the same time, it doesn't goes on top of each other, but it's like playing at the same time, but it still really goes well in harmony because of that crossover, because it has a lot of drivers. And that's exactly what I feel from this IM. It has simply for $100, it has the best separation that I have tried for any IMs around this price point for $100. But technically, it's not only about separation. That there are some things that I feel that is lacking from this IM. For example, like the transient edge, also the attacks of the notes here feels kind of soft. So when I'm hearing some bands, I don't really hear the change in dynamics when I'm hearing the refrain or the first part of the music. I couldn't really hear the emotional change, or when the music is getting stronger and it's more attacking. It feels kind of soft in here. So the resolution and also text feels kind of blunted and soft. But other than that, I would say that the level of details and separation is really good. It's just not really super high resolution because of there's a bluntness in its attack and dynamics. And also talking about the soundstage or head stage, you would say, it has a really nice open big soundstage. So I do feel like I'm hearing to a spherical sensation here, that I could hear where the music, where the instruments is coming from, here or there or here. So in that sense, it has a really good, nice imaging, positioning, soundstage and also separation, but simply lacks in terms of dynamics and transient edge. Now, how is it compared to some of the popular IM? Around 100 price point? Well, this is actually an $80 price point, but it's one of the most popular ones. The SIMGOT EA500. Well, comparing them both, I would say that SIMGOT EA500 sounds more thin and maybe more bright in comparison, making some people feels that it's a little bit too bright for some. But for me, it's a really good IM. Even though it has this kind of brightness, but in terms of bass texture, also timbre, it sounds more natural for me. Also, it has better note definition. But in terms of separation and soundstage, I can't help but feel that the KZ AS24 is definitely much better. So it's a really classic versus a single dynamic driver, a well-tuned dynamic driver, versus a very well-tuned multi-driver IM but using VA. The one is more natural in timbre but not as separated, but the other one is simply much more better separated and more detailed, but it's not as natural. Oh, comparing them with one of the most technical KZ I've ever tried, the KZ PR2. The KZ PR2 is simply the hardest to drive IM for KZ that they have ever released, but it definitely has a really high resolution and really good note definition. It's just simply a little bit too bright for me. The upper treble is just simply too much. Now, comparing them both, I'm not gonna say that the resolution and note definition is still better on the PR2 despite of its large difference in price point, making the PR2 really great in terms of value, but it needs a lot of power to drive them. But in terms of balancing the overall tonality, it's actually better in the KZ AS24. It's not as over, at least when I'm hearing the KZ PR2, I can't help but feels that the upper treble is too much. In the KZ AS24, for me, the tonality balancing and also the tuning is more definitely better and also more balanced overall. and also it has better separation. So again, it's technical versus technical. One is higher in resolution and not definition, but one is better in separation, especially when you're hearing a lot of complex music. So yeah, it goes back to your preference and what kind of music you hear. But if I have to choose one of them, personally, I'm not gonna lie that I still prefer the KZ PR2 a little bit better because of the BA-ishness timbre that I get from the KZ AS24 is less palatable for me when I'm hearing music. Again, it's definitely about preference, and what you prefer might not match mine. Now, how is it compared to a multi-driver IM at around $300 price point, almost $400 price point, like the A-Full Performer 8 that I just tried and reviewed next time after this? Well, comparing them both, it's clear that the both of them have a really good sense of separation. Like when I'm hearing the Senbon Sakura from the Wagaki band, each of the instrumentals like have their own speakers. It's actually, when I'm hearing 8 driver versus 12 driver, there's not a lot of difference in terms of level of separation. But I'm not gonna lie that A-Full Performer 8 definitely outperforms the KZ AS24 in terms of resolution, notes attack, and definition. It's more clearly defined on the A-Full Performer 8. Simply said, the A-Full Performer 8, regardless of the tuning, does feel like a more capable IMs in terms of technicality. I could hear notes are being more defined in the A-Full Performer 8. So for $100 price point, I would say that this is a really special IM in terms of separation, but it doesn't outperforms IM at $300 price point. The quality of the driver definitely reflects that. So as an overall, I would still say for $100, if you're searching for a multi-driver sensation that has a really amazing separation with a well-balanced, well-tuned IM, this is it. But if you are sensitive to driver timbre, also notes attack and definition, this is simply not the best. But that being said, as an overall, I would say still this is one of the IM that I would recommend to try for $100 because it has simply that maybe the best sense of separation for that price point. Again, really nice product from KZ, even though it's not my most preferred IM, but it does have something special to recommend. So that's all I could say about this IM. If you have any question, please write down in the comments below, and thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.